Well, it's the elephant in the room, especially after one recent report, so we might as well talk about it. The future for Nolan Arenado and the St. Louis Cardinals. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you here. It is Friday, November 8th, 2024, and we're going to talk about it. Ever since the end-of-season press conference where the Cardinals basically came out and said, we're decreasing payroll. Hey, is that going to include potentially trading some high-dollar contracts that are already on the books? And Mozeliak said, yeah, those are conversations that are going to be had. Frankly, I was a little surprised with how forward he was about that aspect of it. I thought they were going to more lean into, no, we're not probably going to be spending big in free agency. That's not what this offseason is going to look like, but it may be premature to talk about trading away guys. We really like our guys. I kind of thought we would get that vibe a little bit. And when he said, in the way that he answered the question about potentially trading away current contracts, I thought, okay, this is maybe a step further than maybe I had even anticipated in terms of what they're looking to do with the payroll. And again, this was all pre the FanDuel Sports Network deal that came to fruition yesterday. Go back on the podcast feed and on the YouTube channel to check out my take on all of that. And there will be more to come from that. It just seems like we've got news stories to talk about every day, so I can't necessarily touch on every niche topic, because when I talk about a Cardinals topic, I want to be able to dive into that topic and really give you guys the full depth of my opinion and analysis on something. So we may just have to wait a couple of days before I really maybe tackle the FanDuel stuff again as more information comes out. Although I saw from the Post-Dispatch reporting, I think the number is around $58 million that the Cardinals will be getting annually from FanDuel. It was going to be in the neighborhood of 75 maybe. So that's a reduction for sure. And when I say 75, that was under the old Bally Sports deal where Bally Sports and their parent company Diamond basically said, we're not doing that. If you want to stay with us, it's got to be for less. And so the Cardinals said, all right, we do, because that's going to be a better financial situation for us in the here and now than trying to take it in-house or trying to join the MLB swath of teams that has MLB taking over their broadcasts. The Cardinals decided that this is what's best for them in the now and probably into the next few years, depending on how long exactly the contract was for. So that level of certainty maybe helps things a little bit on the cost front and on the payroll front for 2025, although I think more of an impact it could have in a positive way on 2026 and beyond, just to have a little bit of that certainty for what the revenues can be expected to be. I still don't know, and I'd have to read some of the other coverage to see if this has already been highlighted, and let me know in the comments if you have seen this. The idea of, do the Cardinals benefit from getting more subscribers to the FanDuel app that's going to come out at $20 a month or whatever it is, or does FanDuel end up getting that money? And it just doesn't matter to the Cardinals how many subscribers they get. I imagine it's baked in a little bit that the Cardinals would benefit from having more subscribers. I just don't know the nature of that contract and exactly what was determined, or if it's just a flat $58 million that the Cardinals get. Whatever the case would be there, that is information that I think is going to play into everything that we're talking about here with, are the Cardinals really going to trade away Nolan Arenado? But when that end-of-season press conference happened and that bombshell was sort of dropped, your mind starts to go immediately to, okay, who are the names that we could be talking about being actually dealt by the Cardinals in this offseason in what, if they start doing that kind of stuff, that's a rebuild, right? That's not just a retool necessarily. If they start trading away Sonny, Grey, Willson, Contreras, Nolan Arenado, I mean, that's venturing into territory seldom seen in St. Louis in recent years under the Bill DeWitt era. We just have not seen it under his ownership. So that was sort of the way everybody took that end-of-season press conference, and the mind starts racing of, how much are we talking about here as far as payroll going down? Because you can go decline the options on Lynn and Gibson and Middleton, and you can let Paul Goldschmidt walk, and that's one thing, and that's gonna save you some money for sure. And then you got to figure out arbitration raises, so that's going to cut into a little bit of your savings, but you don't really have to trade anybody away to save a bunch of money, as long as you then don't go out and sign expensive free agents to replace those players, which we know, of course, the Cardinals are not going to do. But would that have been enough, or do you have to take the next step of actually trading guys? Okay, Mo says they're going to trade guys, or that it's on the table. He wasn't very specific. He said, I got to talk to those guys, being honest. And it's the big three, and then the other names that come up, if we're talking about money, and the no trade aspect of it is, well, Miles Mikolas is the big name that comes up, but he's different. I think it's disingenuous to treat Mikolas in the same category as the other three, with the connecting thread being, well, they all have no trade clauses. That's great. But if you look at the 4 players, 3 of them other teams are going to want, maybe not at their current salaries. Cardinals might have to eat some of the money if they try to trade Arenado, Grey, or Contreras, but other teams will want to have those players in their lineups or in their rotation. Miles Mikolas, I don't know that you can say that for sure. That there might be 29 other teams that look at Miles Mikolas, and even if the Cardinals are to eat 90% of his salary for 2025, 29 other teams might still say thanks, but no thanks. You know, he's one of the worst starters in baseball statistically last season. He's making $18.5 million for 2025. Again, the Cardinals could eat 16 of that. Would another team want to plug Mikolas into their rotation for $2.5 million? I don't know. Is that even worth doing if you're the Cardinals? Because how much are you really saving? And as much as I know folks want to bag on Mikolas, and he was very poor last year in his performance, he is a former All-Star, 2-time All-Star. He is somebody that, even if the ERA is not going to be shiny, you trust him to go out there and throw 180 innings. Again, it's going to feel kind of like mop-up innings. He had a 5.35 ERA last year. And so you're not really sure what you're going to get out of him. What I will say for Miles, he had a 4.24 FIP. His fielding independent pitching actually, believe it or not, went down. It was better in 2024 by just a smidge compared to 2023. When it was 4.27. But we've talked about this before, and even dating back to when he was really good in 2022, you know, that FIP wasn't all too dissimilar to what he's done the last 2 years. 3.87 to 4.27 to 4.24. That's all within about the same range. And so if that's all you're looking at, you could say, well, Miles was just unlucky. Increasingly unlucky each of the last 2 seasons. Well, I don't really necessarily believe into that. It's part of the reason I say, yeah, FIP, take it with a grain of salt, understand that it exists, but it's not the end-all, be-all. I'm going to pay more attention to, you know, ERA, what'd you actually give up? And I know that some analytically minded folks would kind of poo-poo that and say, well, that ERA is not as good of a status FIP. Well, I like it because how many runs did you give up, and were there errors that played into it that we don't need to count that against you? But what'd you give up? I think it's fair, right? It may not be predictive. FIP might be more predictive of what a guy could do next year. But I would make the case that, and I know, small sample because we're only looking at one player and his tendencies against FIP, which is fielding independent pitching, again, for the uninitiated. He was way below on ERA in 2022. He had a 3.29 ERA, but a 3.87 FIP. That's more than a half run better on ERA than FIP. You could say he was lucky relative to FIP. 2023 and 2024, his ERA was significantly higher in both years than his fielding independent pitching. So you could say he was unlucky. Or you could watch the games and say, boy, it doesn't look the same for Miles Mikolas, does it? To me, most of the time it didn't. He'd have his games where he'd be on, but a lot of times it just looked like he'd be telegraphing the breaking ball, and it didn't have the bite to it. It didn't have the juice. So I don't think at age 36, Miles Mikolas next year is suddenly going to turn into a guy that has the juice relative to what we've seen the last 2 years, but maybe I could be wrong. The Cardinals might say it doesn't matter since there's no teams that really are interested in eating much of the salary. We're not gaining any benefit, and we're certainly not going to get any prospects for him if we're offering him via trade. So his status is different than the other 3. The other 3, I feel like the conversation should have gone something like, hey guys, here's the situation. Arenado, Willson, Sonny, here's what we're doing. You know, the payroll's going to go down. I know you wanted to be part of a winner when we brought you here. We did it for a reason. It's not what we anticipated. Where do you stand? You know, because we would understand if you wanted to maybe be somewhere else, somewhere that more immediately is focused on winning as the organization's top priority. We want to get back to winning, but it might not match up with the timeline that you're under contract here. So let's be honest and frank about that. How do you feel? Well, as it's been reported in recent days, we have some insight, and Derek Gould did a great job. I'm sure he is down there at the GM meetings in San Antonio. I am working currently to try to get to the winter meetings that's going to be in Dallas in early December. By the way, this is a reality of our business at this point. Something that helps to be able to do the coverage and facilitate some of this stuff and the podcast that we do. Partners and sponsors is a big aspect of it. So if you have a business, if you have any interest in becoming even if it's just for the week of the winter meetings and you want to sponsor the show, hit me up. I'm very accessible. DM. My email's out there. I'll just give you my email. It's the same as my Twitter, b-schaefer12 at outlook.com. I'm b-schaefer12 anywhere you're going to find me. But yeah, if you like the show, you like the work we do, and you want to be a part of helping to facilitate winter meetings happening and getting that coverage to the people here, that's a way you can do it. Hit me up. Not doing it out of the goodness of your heart. You're doing it because you have a business and you believe that, hey, there's an audience for this show, and the audience for the show supports the aspects of this show. So that would be what I would be talking about there. Anybody, seriously, if you have an idea, let's get creative. I would love to work with you. But I want to credit Derek Gould for his reporting from down at the GM meetings, where got a chance to talk to Mikolas, and this was in the context of that Willson Contreras conversation a couple of days ago. He's moving to first base /DH. Mikolas had said it's part of him wanting to stay with the Cardinals, and it's also about keeping him healthy long term. He's got that contract still. Cardinals want to get the most out of him. That's not really the discussion I'm having here, but just giving you the context. That conversation had happened with Willson Contreras, and his feeling after that was, I want to remain a Cardinal. Gould tweeted this. Again, Derek Gould, STL Today. Willson Contreras, who has a no-trade clause, has told the club and others his wish to remain with the Cardinals. And then Derek continued in his tweet. Sonny Gray also shared with the club a preference to stay at this time, per sources. So Derek is reporting that information. Mikolas said he's spoken to all players with no trade clauses for their view. And that was the whole tweet. So everybody said, and I even had some fun with it, and quoted Derek's report and said, I'm no genius, but I can do that math. And the math, of course, is referencing Nolan Arenado. That's sort of the elephant in the room, right? When it's reported that, hey, Willson's been outspoken. He wants to stay. Here's what he's doing to make it happen. Cardinals have multiple catchers that are on the cheap. They could easily trade Contreras, shed a little bit of salary, and maybe, get a pitching prospect for him or get another piece for him that's going to help in 2026 or even maybe in 2025, but at more of a position of need. Because even though it was 2 off seasons ago, catcher is not a need right now for the Cardinals. They like Pages. They like Ivan Herrera. And those two are going to be your catchers in 2025. At the time, they didn't know what they were going to get from Herrera. They didn't really, Pages was not as much of a thought at that point. And by the way, you've got Jimmy Crooks coming on the way too. I think he'll be at Memphis next year. So catcher, the circumstances have changed surrounding the catcher position since the Willson contract was signed. And maybe even in that moment where they agreed with Willson, the Cardinals might have had this in mind. They might have thought, in a couple of years from now, maybe Herrera turns it around. Right now, we don't trust him to take over. Remember, he didn't have a great 2022 season. He has rededicated himself since then and has really made strides. Now the Cardinals trust him more. I think that's fair, right? But at the moment, they said, well, we're still in that mode of, yes, every year we do need to contend. We do need to try to win, so we got to replace Yachty. And we got to probably spend to do it. If we're not trading for Sean Murphy, we got to go out in free agency. And they made the decision. They said, Willson Contreras is our fit. He's our guy. Let's get him. To get him, you probably had to do a 4 or 5 year contract with that 6th-year option as well. So those are aspects of it that the Cardinals had to reckon with because the catcher position in the organization at the time was not as, it didn't look as clear. You didn't have the confidence in the group of, Kisner was here, but you kind of, they didn't have the confidence. Now you look at it differently. I think they do have confidence in the 2 catchers they're going to proceed with. Willson Contreras, now that 2 years have passed, we can evaluate, he's been a really good hitter. I don't think the Cardinals have had a better hitter in their lineup the last 2 seasons than Willson Contreras, counting everything. So that sort of allows you to go, at one point in time, you would say, does Willson have the bat to command regular time at first base /DH, or is he going to be, lagging behind a little bit to where you don't know if that's justifiable? Well, I think certainly with what we've seen from Willson the last 2 years, 2024, he led the Cardinals in OPS. He had an 848 OPS. Nobody else on the team that played even for a minute had an 800 or better OPS, except for one of the catchers, Ivan Herrera. So, and I'm going to talk more about this. I know this is supposed to be the Arenado episode, but I get on these tangents, and I do think this is information that I would like to deliver to Cardinals fans and opinion and analysis, so here I am doing it. I'm going to do a whole podcast soon about Luke and Baker, because Cardinals fans are like, why are they moving Willson to first base? Luke and Baker. All the Luke and Baker questions I got to my Willson podcast told me I need to expand on that in depth. But for the quick version of it is Luke Baker had a sub 700 OPS for the Cardinals last year in a limited duty. Nice bench bat, but Ivan Herrera is the guy that you rearrange your roster for. This allows him to play as a catcher, as a DH, moving Contreras to first base. You also don't have a first baseman because Goldschmidt is gone. So the Cardinals, remember, the key to this is they're not rebuilding. They're insisting this is not a rebuild. This is not a teardown. This is a retool. And a retool, by definition, you want to take the most advantage that you can from the assets at your disposal, move them around a little bit, change the things that need changing to be able to set up the foundation. But that doesn't mean that the Cardinals are aiming to lose 95 games this year. They're not. And so that's why you're not just trading Contreras to get a prospect and eat money. Don't do their job for them, Cardinals fans. Don't, just because they say, hey, we're going to lower payroll, don't root for and advocate for them trading away $18.5 million of Willson Contreras' salary, because the team's going to be a lot worse if they do that next year. Have him in the lineup. He's your best hitter in 2024 by a lot, almost by 100 points on OPS, if other than Ivan Herrera, who OPS'd 800. And in 2023, guess who led the team in OPS? It was Willson Contreras. He's been their best hitter 2 years that he's been here. Both years he's been here, he's been their best hitter. So, yeah, you can move that guy to first base. You can pay that guy $18.5 million and have this Cardinals team in 2025 not completely fall on its face. That's an admirable goal, even if you're trying to save a little money because you weren't sure. And look, they're losing $17 million in revenue compared to the FanDuel/Bally deal from a year ago. So, yeah, that's going to have to be baked in, especially as they're increasing the resources being spent on the minors, and they're hiring Rob Cerfolio and paying him a salary and all those things. So, like, this is all happening at once, but the Cardinals are not trying to be terrible. That's not their goal. Their goal is to save some money, and they're going to do that by just the Goldschmidt, Lynn, Gibson, and Middleton moves. And then you say, okay, what other moves need to happen to blend these goals? Not a total rebuild, but it is a retool. All right, Sonny Gray wants to stay. Willson wants to stay, and we have an obvious spot for Willson. It makes a lot of sense. We're going to put him at first base because we just lost our first baseman, and he's our best hitter. If he can play the defense of it, it works out really well, actually. And I'll break down like how much first I actually think he's going to play compared to Burley, compared to Baker, and all that kind of stuff on a different podcast. But we're going to get back into it now, the meat of the conversation of Nolan Arenado. What happens there? Well, again, I can do the math where if you say, and again, this is just based off of Derek's report, and he's reliable, so we'll talk about it. If you say that Willson wants to stay, Sonny wants to stay, and the Cardinals have talked to all the players that, that have no trade clauses, all right, what stands out? Well, technically, he didn't mention Miles Mikolas. My point there is, who cares? That's not really part of this conversation. He'll either stay, or they'll DFA him, or they'll find a taker for him in a salary dump type of deal, or, yeah, he'll be in their rotation, and they're paying him. But it's not like you're going to Mikolas and saying, hey, Mikolas, this is the deal. Do you want to go somewhere else? For a couple of reasons. One, he's from Jupiter. There's nowhere else that Miles Mikolas would rather be. He's content to be here if the Cardinals will have him, right? That's sort of going to be the vibe of this. It's the ideal spot for Miles Mikolas to be. From Jupiter, loves his boat. They train in Jupiter. It's very simple. That's an ideal circumstance for Miles Mikolas. Miles is happy to be a Cardinal if they'll have him back, and he's going to give his all, right? I think that might end up being what happens. But I don't feel like the conversation with Mikolas had to be quite the same as the others for that reason. You kind of know going in that he wants to still be here because his performance dictates that maybe other contenders aren't jumping at the chance to add him anyway. And it's literally, if he could handpick, you would probably want to be a Marlin or a Cardinal for the reasons of the location. Maybe the Marlins would be even a little bit better because you probably sneak up to Jupiter during the season more often than he can get there with the Cardinals because it's so close to Miami. But other than that, like, Miles Mikolas is good. The Cardinals will be the ones kind of dictating how they want to handle his situation. The others had the leverage to say, yeah, I'd kind of like to go, because you don't want to necessarily be the marquee free agent that performs for his team, and then after being told it's going to be a competitive group, it's not, and you're just kind of stuck, right? It's not that they're demanding a trade, and I don't even think that's what Arenado is doing. But I think if the Cardinals came to Arenado, which it seems like those conversations have happened, and said, hey, what do you think? Yeah, it wouldn't be crazy, and I wouldn't blame Arenado if he said it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if we looked around and saw what could be out there as far as a team trying to win the World Series in 2025, because that's what Nolan Arenado wants to do, and the Cardinals have made their stated goal something different. It's not their stated goal to win the World Series in 2025 from the front office perspective. Ollie Marmol is going to say, we want to win the Central, we want to win the World Series. And he's right to do it. The circumstances surrounding the team are going to make it more of a challenge to accomplish that goal in 2025. And that's where the business side of it comes in. And I think Arenado would be within his rights to say differently, as would have been Willson Contreras or Sonny Gray. It seems as though those two have said, I would like to stay. And I think Contreras was probably the most outspoken. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, right? Because who knows exactly how he feels until he speaks publicly. And even then, you're always going to get that filtered version where somebody's not going to say something, off color, off putting, even if internally they're like, yeah, I wish it had gone a little bit differently. I wish I could still be a catcher. I really like to be a catcher. But he wants to be a Cardinal more. Like, it could very well be that, So he's the consummate teammate. Sonny Gray, we haven't really heard from him. Don't know quite as much about him because he's only been here 1 year compared to 2. But, he's from the Tennessee area, pretty close to home. At this stage in his career, it would be, he's played for a lot of teams already. And sometimes a guy at this point in your career, you're comfortable in a spot. You don't necessarily want to have to uproot your family again. Sonny Gray said, I'm good with it. I believe in the team. I can be a guide to these younger players, to a Michael McGreevy. I can help out Andre Palante. I'm staying. Right? Arenado, maybe a different situation. So let's talk about Arenado. Contract situation. 2025, he's going to make $32 million, but $5 of it's covered by Colorado. 2026, $27 million, $5 of it covered by the Rockies. And remember, to get the trade to trigger to St. Louis, he baked in that extra year, 2027, $15 million. So I believe that happened, was added in as an incentive for the trade, to where if Arenado gets to that stage in his career and he's still extremely productive, you can renegotiate your contract with the team, but you get the $15 million. Even if by 36 years old, he's old and busted and can't play, whoever's got him, currently it's the Cardinals, they're on the hook for that $15 million, right? And if you're in a spot where you're performing and you're worth more than that, then you can renegotiate at that point. But you're guaranteed that $15 million, worst case scenario, you retire on the spot, whatever, you get that money. But that's not really a terrible number, that 15. You're talking like, 50-something million bucks for the next 2 years. And then, yes, you're owed the $15 million for 2027, but that could be kind of massaged a little bit depending on how he's performing. But it's still guaranteed future money of, what is it? $74 million over the next 3 years? 64, I think, that the Cardinals are currently on the hook for. It's not an albatross. It's nothing crazy, but the problem is Arenado's performance decline over really the last couple of years compared to his peak. How do other contenders view that? Teams that would be looking to add a difference-making player, those teams would add a difference maker and usually have the salary not even really be that much of a concern. You're always going to try to save as much money as you can, but there are teams out there that they're going to take on salary if they think it can help them win. That's the place their organization is in as a franchise, and they're ready to do that. Is Arenado that player where you say, yeah, the money we'll figure the money out, but this is a guy that we're going to plug right in? I think he can still be that guy, personally. But in his age 33 season this past year, he was a 719 OPS. That's a 101 OPS plus. That's about a league average player offensively. Was still a Gold Glove finalist at third, so good defense. But that offensive line is down from 774 OPS the prior year and 891 now 3 years ago in 2022 when he was the third finisher in the MVP vote. Won a Gold Glove, Silver Slugger, put up those offensive numbers and the defensive numbers. Had a 30 and 100 season with homers and RBIs. He was, vintage Nolan Arenado at that point. What does the team trading for him get from him? How much are they willing to pay on that salary? I think any team that sees the situation the Cardinals are in is going to be savvy enough to understand that they're doing this because they're trying to save money. So they're going to be willing to eat a little bit of the money because it's still going to be cost savings for them. So the team that gets Arenado is going to be looking to take advantage of that. But how much money the Cardinals eat versus what do they get in the way of prospects for Arenado is going to be part of that balancing act. And how valuable in terms of trade assets and prospects do other teams consider Arenado to be? All questions that don't have perfect answers right now. So I think it's compelling to wonder, how aggressive would the Cardinals be in trying to make this happen? Well, if Arenado has been spoken to by Mo, and he's like, yeah, or his agent has been spoken to by Mo, and the sentiment is, yep, I'd like to see a trade, then I think the Cardinals are going to be willing to work that out. And it's not going to be fun, but you're almost going to have to not, as a Cardinal fan, get too hung up on what are they getting for him. It's more about the timing of it and the business aspect of it than what are they getting for him. Now, the Cardinals aren't just going to trade him for nothing. There is leverage in that there's a finite resource, and that resource is Nolan Arenado, and there are contending teams that want that resource on their team. So the Cardinals have that leverage, but there is the leverage that other teams are going to have over the Cardinals of, it seems like the tea leaves are suggesting this guy wants to be traded and you want to trade him. So striking that match could end up being underwhelming for Cardinals fans that see the trade ultimately that comes to fruition, and they go, oh man, Cardinals had to eat more money than I thought, and they're just no better than the Rockies. They're paying him to go away, and that's going to be a topic. And who's this prospect? He's not even in the top 100 or whatever. Like, that's going to be a thing that I think gets discussed and gets thrown around, and that's just the narrative surrounding it, but it doesn't necessarily impact what the Cardinals are looking to do in this deal. I would say have it out right now mentally and emotionally, Cardinals fans. I do not see Arenado on the Cardinals in 2025. It would surprise me if he's on the team. I'm not quite 90-10 that he's traded, like 90% gone, 10% could stay, but it's not far from that. Because again, if you're talking about shedding payroll, and they've done a good job of that already, in terms of just taking the impending free agents and the option guys and saying sayonara, there's not a lot else to be done unless you start trading guys at this point. And Arenado's, other than Sonny, the highest paid guy. So that would be where you'd start, especially if he's kind of wanting to go anyway. The other reason that, like, again, from not a rebuild, but a retool standpoint, I've seen this sentiment about other moves the Cardinals could make. And when we talk about Ryan Helsley, I say, probably makes sense to trade him, not because you're just dumping the salary that he's going to get, the raise in ARB, because he led the league in saves, but from a value proposition standpoint, closing pitchers, relievers, usually have a shelf life. It's not about Helsley, it's just about the position he plays, and his value today might not be his value tomorrow, or it might not be his value in July if you're looking to trade him on an expiring contract, or it might not be his value in 2 years if you decide we like Ryan Helsley, we want to extend him and give him a contract, pay him a little bit. You can do that. I just wonder about the long-term value proposition of that relative to right now. He would be the biggest name on the market on the pitching front, on the relief pitching front for sure, and maybe even on the pitching front overall, depending on which starters get traded. Now that it looks like Sonny Gray is not going to be dealt, Helsley would be a piece that teams are looking to add, whether they've got a closer or not. We see the way October baseball is played in recent years. You got to have a bullpen. Ryan Helsley would be a weapon. And if the Cardinals are not making it their primary goal to get to October in 2025, that's Ryan Helsley's last year of team control, and he's going to get a nice hefty raise. It makes all the sense in the world to trade him for those reasons. Coupled with the fact that relievers that you sign to extensions, a lot of times we look back on those contracts, not because of Helsley, but because of the position, and go, probably wasn't great value. Even the ones that aren't terrible. Like you look at Andrew Miller when the Cardinals signed him to a free agent deal. You're like, he had some good moments. He had some solid years. Probably overpaid. And then the pendulum can swing all the way to the Brett Cecil side of things where you go, dear Lord in heaven, what happened here? Why did we do this? Right? Not comparing Ryan Helsley to Brett Cecil. I am just comparing the positional group and saying there is a moment in time when it comes to closers. And right now, I think the Cardinals could strike while the iron is hot, especially considering that having the best closer in baseball doesn't necessarily align with their 2025 goals. If Helsley had more years of control left, I would say, well, no, you're not trading Ryan Helsley because you need a good closer in 2026 when you're back ready to have contention be top of mind. Maybe I'm naive to think that the Cardinals are going to turn things around or be ready to pay on salaries and payroll that quickly. But that would be enough for me to say, no, you don't trade Ryan Helsley. But as it stands, I think you do. And we'll talk more about it as the season or the offseason goes along, rather. But the other name that keeps popping up that I don't really get is Brenden Donovan. I see people talking about Brenden Donovan. And it doesn't make any sense to me. That's, if I was making a list, he's one of the first names I would say you're keeping. You're not trading Mason Wynn. And I know that Brenden Donovan, you're going to have to start, considering paying him a little bit, but how long is the retool? I mean, how many years are you really ready to be down as an organization because Brenden Donovan. Brenden Donovan's going to be here a while if you want him to be, and he's a really good player. He's a versatile player, and people say, "Well, it's just like Tommy Edman." No, it's not. Brenden Donovan can't be a free agent until after 2027. He's got 3 full years of ARB still to go. I think he's going to hit ARB. What is it? He's going to hit ARB this year. Yeah, because this was his third season of service time. 22, 23, 24. So I think he's ARB this offseason, ARB 1, and then he'll be ARB 2, and then he'll be ARB 3. That's 3 more years of Brenden Donovan at a somewhat cost-controlled rate. You don't trade Brenden Donovan. You extend him now. You buy out his ARB years and hopefully a free agent year at a reasonable amount. You give him a 4 or 5 year contract. That's what I would do. I would do it today. Cardinals probably not going to because they want to have the flexibility amid the uncertainty, but he's a building block in my opinion. If you look at his numbers, not even defensively, but just as a player offensively, 3 seasons, OPS plus, which is relative to league average being 100. He's a 124, he's a 114, he's a 112. 773 OPS, 787 OPS, 759 OPS. Part of that, he was dealing with a significant injury that they ended up getting him surgery to repair. He's a 771 OPS over a 1,491 plate appearance sample, 116 OPS plus for his career. He's 16% above league average, and he turns 28 in January. So he's still got several prime years to go. He can play good left field defense, second base, third base. You want Brenden Donovan on your team. It would be crazy to me to trade him unless there's a player out there in the universe that's available in a Brenden Donovan trade that I'm not realizing is available, and he's just a stud. Because that's what Brenden Donovan is. He's a stud. He's cost-controlled, at least to the extent that you've got him through arbitration for the next few years. The other aspect of this is I'm 85-15, close to pushing 90-10 that the Cardinals are going to trade Nolan Arenado this winter. So if that happens, and look, we'll continue to cover the possibilities. I had meant to play some Michael Kay audio because he was his Yankees announcer who says, hey, I think the Yankees should look at Nolan Arenado. No, he said that Cardinals should eat $12 to $15 million. I don't know if that's per year or total. I think total the Cardinals would be into that. Per year, probably not. But there are going to be teams that want Nolan Arenado. How much do they want him? How badly will they push to get him? Will there be a bidding war between teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers and some of those top contenders that they're just looking for one more infinity stone in their lineup? Maybe. It would benefit the Cardinals if there were one. But, yeah, I mean, in the context of that Yankees thing was that it was a backup plan to Juan Soto. If they can't sign Soto, here's how you splash. You trade for Arenado. Fair. But I look at Brenden Donovan and I say, if you're trading Arenado, the lineup kind of makes itself. Whether you believe in Nolan Gorman, he finished last year in Memphis. Wasn't even on the big league team. So to say that he's your day one starter at second base in 2025 might be a little bit of a scary proposition, but also the pressure's off a little bit. The Cardinals are not trying to win the World Series in 2025. They're trying, they're just not likely to do it, and they're okay with that as an organization from top to bottom. So what does that mean? You can have Nolan Gorman have a year of 550 plate appearances, and if he hits 175 and strikes out 250 times, then he does, but at least At least you gave him the chance to work through that, and that's it, Or he turns it around, and you're glad that you stuck it out with him, right? Those are the two possibilities, and it's the same thing with Jordan Walker. It's the same thing with all these guys. Alec Burleson, it's the same thing with him. It's the same thing with a lot of these younger players that are going to get opportunity this year as a result of these roster moves. But Brenden Donovan can play third. He can play second. If Arenado's being traded, your third baseman is pick. Is it Gorman or is it Donovan? The other is your starting second baseman. And Sajaci is the backup at third, second, and short. So he's going to play plenty. I don't see a problem with this. I don't see the logic in trading Donovan. So, again, I introduced a bunch of different topics in this, and I went a little long. But folks that listened to the podcast back like in the heat of the summer and last year are glad because they're like, yeah, it used to be 40 minutes, an hour. And you don't talk as long anymore. Sometimes I try, but sometimes the juice is not worth the squeeze. Anyway, these are topics that I'm going to get into more. I want to talk more about the Donovan thing. I want to talk more about the Baker thing. But the gist is I think the Arenado trade makes sense, and I think it's going to happen. So let me know your thoughts, Cardinals fans. What are you hoping the Cardinals can get for Arenado? Are you understanding of the situation they're in with him and maybe what his desires might be since he was not mentioned in the report of the players that want to stay? you kind of assume maybe it means the opposite is true. We'll see. It's not a confirmation by any means, but it's notable that nobody's come out and said, yes, Arenado really wants to stay. We'll wait and see. But let me know what your thoughts are, Cardinals fans, and we'll continue to have regular conversations about this team through the offseason. I'll start doing some more live streams, too. I'm a little tentative because I'm like, if I do one and I'm always kind of self-conscious about that. Nobody listens to it. Nobody wants to watch it. Then it's like, well, I could have just done it without doing it live and save myself some headache. But I definitely enjoy doing them. And you guys, when you're in there, it's like, love the comments and you drive the show. So I love that, too. We'll do more. I promise we will. But for now, just appreciate you guys for sticking with me, for listening, and for supporting the show. Check out a channel membership on YouTube. The link is in the description to the video below if you're interested in supporting me in that way. But otherwise, the Discord link should still be active as well. Lots to talk about in the offseason. Appreciate you guys as always. I'm going to wrap it here. We'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.